Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole crew styling when we step out of the car. Bouncers lift the rope and the crowd goes off. 20 shots to the table, we don't even hit the bar.
Want to welcome back our audience and our listeners here to the Inspicio Arts collaboration with the Florida International University Ratcliffe Art and Design Incubator. And I want to welcome in Ray Ellman.
Thank you, Maggie, and it's great to see you as always.
As always, Ray, I know we've been taking a hiatus, but we're back. We're doing these special summer ones, right?
Right. It's always summer down here.
Our next guest is quite fascinating, Susan Orlean, author of 12 books. She's currently a staff writer at The New Yorker, and she's coming up with an adaptation of the library book. What makes her a special guest on Inspicio?
Well, Susan is somebody that I also had the good fortune to meet quite a while back. And the story of how we met is kind of interesting. So there's an arts organization that my wife was president of. It's called Truro Center for the Arts at Castle Hill. And they were having a fundraising event at the home of a Pulitzer Prize recipient, Justin Kaplan, in Cambridge, in the Boston area. And Susan Orlean was the guest of honor. Susan Orlean is, her biggest hit is The Orchid Thief, which is an incredible book, a bestseller. And it was made into a movie called Adaptation with Meryl Streep playing Susan Orlean in the movie. So it doesn't get much better than that if you're an author. I mean, whoever dreams that Meryl Streep is going to play you in a movie. Anyway, so Susan came to the fundraiser at the Kaplan house, and she came dressed as an orchid, which was funny. And I quite often for fundraisers will donate commissioned portraits, meaning that if somebody donates, or people will bid on having me do a portrait of them, and I bring along one of my portraits as a sample. And in this case, I had the portrait I brought along as a sample so people would understand what my portraits look like. It was portraits of two redheaded twins. Their mother was the widow of Supreme Court Justice Douglas. And these twins were riveting looking. And Susan saw the sample portrait and bought it because she said she's got red hair, and she said it reminded her of herself when she was young. So that's how we met, and we became friends. And we actually went to her 50th birthday party, which coincided with her having a baby. And she, I don't know if I did the portrait as part of a fundraiser or I just did it, but I made a portrait of her with her newborn, and we're driving to her house. She had bought a house in Dutchess County in New York, and we're thinking, wait a minute, this can't be her 50th birthday party. She just had a baby. But it was true. She just had a baby. And
wow, so she was a late bloomer.
Absolutely. But she's not a late bloomer as a writer. She's a fantastic writer. And again, kind of like with Sebastian Junger, who wrote about what it feels like to drown at sea, and yet it's a fascinating read. Susan wrote, the beginning of The Orchid Thief is the history of orchids. And orchids were one of the most prized things in the world years ago. And so that sets the stage for how special orchids are. But you're reading what could have been dry history, but because of her talent as a writer, it's fascinating. And then the whole experience takes place in Florida, in the Everglades, where she finds this kind of quasi-legal orchid hunter who was played by Chris Cooper in the movie, and he won an Academy Award for it. And it was based on a real guy. And they're looking for the famous and elusive ghost orchid in the Everglades. And so she spent a lot of time in South Florida, which is her connection to us. So the other part is that she's a New Yorker writer and has been a New Yorker staff writer for quite a while. She lives in LA now, wrote a book about Rin Tin Tin, among other things. I would read anything Susan wrote because she could take my fingernail and make it interesting.
Yeah, it's funny because she says, in the intro that is on the Inspicio Arts website on the carousel, when you look her up, it says that she's very uneventful because she's from Cleveland, Ohio, right? Is that correct?
Right. Shaker Heights, a famous suburb of Cleveland. But she took a new gig at the New Yorker, which is writing obituaries. And one of the interesting things about this, I mean, we all kind of take obits in stride unless you become an aficionado of obits. And it turns out I have another friend who was a Boston Globe columnist for a long time. He retired or took a bailout, today's newspaper bailout, golden parachute program, and just writes obituaries for them. But when you write a really good obituary, it's like writing a mini biography. And good writers can turn an obituary into a riveting story.
I agree.
And I'm sure that's what Susan does for the New Yorker.